So if I now, especially in light of the fact that he was turning 20 years old, um, probably my biggest mistake in my 20 years, 20 years of being CEO, is not to have started the intern program sooner.
So if you recall from part one, a lot of what was being discussed there was CCP trying to adapt to changing gaming industry trends and really opening the floodgates of monetization with companies all over the spectrum trying to see how much they can get away with. CCP were on the bumbling side of trying to get through that, even sort of by their own admission, really didn't do a very good job of trying to adapt and navigate those waters. But that's not going to stop them. So let's move ahead. Up until now, we've only sparingly talked about CCP's CEO, Hilmar Veigar Petursson. You see, CCP Hilmar is someone I feel I can safely call a tech guy turned businessman. To understand how we got to this point and to understand how we get to Eve Frontier, we really need to take some time to dive into his aspirations. If there's anyone confused about why present-day CCP is making its fourth FPS game and a Web3 blockchain crypto game in 2025, this next part will probably strike like a wave of enlightenment for you. So it's 2016. CCP CEO Hilmar is giving a talk at DICE Europe, a games industry networking conference titled "Why Are We Doing This Really? The Human Benefit of Computer Games." I've watched several of these interviews, but this one comes in just before he really dives into full crypto mode, and it's focused on an audience of gaming industry types. That's who he's talking to, other people in the gaming industry primarily. In this speech, Hilmar explains how he believes humanity will be building Dyson spheres in about 200 years, curing cancer with CRISPR to live forever, and building virtual heavens. Those last two seem to conflict a bit, but you know what? It's his speech.
I learned in my endless YouTube surfing for this talk about a concept called CRISPR, which is basically a robot to runtime decode and encode our DNA. Okay, so not only do we have all this science fiction becoming science fact, we're about to cure cancer, aging, and God knows what. It's just going to be cured foreseeably in our lifetimes. We might live forever if we want to. So this is a picture of a matryoshka brain. So in my search, I found this. It's a pretty damn cool concept. So not only could we theoretically, in the next 100 years or so, build a Dyson sphere and thus capture all the energy out of the sun, we could make concentric Dyson spheres, and that becomes a computing device by using the differential of the heat dispersion of each concentric layer. And people have designed a computing device out of this. So the physics, maybe not the philosophy of it, but the physics of it, are known. You can go on YouTube, you can see all the calculations. David actually wanted me to run through the calculation, but I'm not going to do that.
Another thing he talks about is virtual reality. In 2013, virtual reality started to hit the market, and it has evolved to become the hot thing in this time period. Around this time, CCP released 4 VR games. Gunjack, an arcade shooter released in 2015, Gunjack 2, an arcade shooter released in 2016 for whatever the Google Daydream is. Pull up an image of the Google Daydream. Yeah, somehow I've never heard of that one. They also released Eve Valkyrie in 2016, a VR space combat game which miraculously survived until 2022 when the plug is finally pulled, killing the game. There's also a 4th one called Spark, with a C at the end, which was apparently for the Oculus Store. Anyways. In his speech, he talks about how he believes VR will see mass market adoption, even stating, "We've taken a massive stance on VR and will continue to do that." And of course, with such a strong statement of support for VR, it's only natural that next year they'll close their US studio and cut their UK studio and pull out of the VR market. Once again, the population of ex-CCP employees has grown, and they will instead start focusing on PC and mobile games. As a quick aside here, CCP does have a Shanghai studio, and they do have some partnerships with companies like NetEase. And I mentioned earlier that they do have a Chinese server for EVE Online too. So on the mobile game side of things, they have EVE Echoes and they have EVE Galaxy Conquest, which I know that EVE Echoes was developed in part by NetEase, and then I think Galaxy Conquest was CCP. I'm assuming both are developed specifically for the Chinese and the Asian markets, since that tends to be where mobile games go to roost, as far as I'm aware. But I'm not a mobile games guy, so I'm not really going to focus on that. I do know that Galaxy Conquest was considered to be pretty low effort by EVE fans, and if you look at screenshots from it, it looks pretty low effort. Some even thought that it might actually have AI-generated art assets, and allegedly EVE Echoes might actually have some too. I cannot confirm that one way or the other, but I do know that CCP Hilmar is pretty open to AI stuff. In the previous video, I did mention the numerous FPS game attempts. We can skip that part. We don't need to go over it again. One thing I do want to mention, though, is that there was an attempt to make like a collectible card game, and I think some other like tabletop-y sort of stuff that was actually related to the World of Darkness acquisition. But, well, we know that that ended up going too, so we can move on from that. It's not the subject of the video. Sorry, we're moving on. Now, look, at this point, you might be starting to get a little bit restless, and you might be starting to wonder, what does any of this have to do with eFrontier? Well, would you believe me if I told you that CCP Hilmar started talking about blockchain and crypto games back in 2016?
Bitcoin actually has a cooler thing underneath, which is the blockchain, which is super cool. The more you dig into it, it's like, whoa, we should use this for games. This like has definition of work. This has controlled item origination. We could really kind of unify all games together through this, not with some weird item exchange, as people have tried out, but kind of we could go lower. We can go to the fundamental assumptions of work and how people value their time. I think there's a super opportunity in somebody to figure that out. Maybe it might be us, maybe it will be somebody here, how to leverage the blockchain for controlling item origination, destruction, and work on the blockchain for all games in the world, and then take over the banking system, which you know is any mission of anyone from Iceland.
Now look, this isn't entirely out of left field. Blockchain and crypto game schemes were starting to pop up around this time, and the first blockchain games start to show up the following year. I have little doubt Hilmar was acutely aware of those developments, but for the general public, COVID represents a time where the zeitgeist of NFTs and blockchain really started to come to the forefront. Blockchain, crypto, and stuff predates that, but there was obviously quite a bit of energy during that time period. And that's when everybody was really starting to jump on the wagon. And in the context of DICE Europe 2016 and then DICE Europe 2017, other industry professionals are giving a wide variety of speeches on things like business relationships and taking advantage of new VR technologies and social media. Hilmar, though, is going to talk about the future, and the future is blockchain. And also AI game development.
I want to talk a little more about kind of all the cool stuff which we're getting in addition to VR. And I'm going to start by artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, of course, is something that computer games have used for decades. We have NPCs in EVE. They look intelligent. I've actually programmed some bits of them. They're not super intelligent, but they are really good at faking it. So they're a form of intelligence, but they don't learn. They don't really persist their discoveries over time. We're actually now doing some experiments on how we can make the system of EVE learn through kind of leveraging AI and persistent learning into the system.
So this whole bit's a little weird, especially for me who's very familiar with EVE Online, because the NPC AI in the game is extremely rudimentary. And I'm not aware of it having been improved at all with any machine learning anything in the last 10 years. So whatever experiments they did, clearly they must have failed, because I don't know.
So AI has made amazing strides. And I don't think we're using it enough and in the right ways for computer games. I think we can start to leverage AI a lot when it comes to building worlds. I recently learned of a massive tech company in the world that has hundreds of their smartest people working on AI, as everyone seems to be doing these days. And they have found a way to have their AI recognize any form of cat. So if they have taught the AI to recognize a cat, then it has a pretty good understanding of what a cat is, what it's made of, its bits and pieces, how it moves. So if the AI already knows this about a cat, it should be able to create a cat. So we go through this extraneous process of making concept art, modeling, texturing, integrating, rigging, animating, fur dynamics, God knows what, to make a cat, and cats seems to be a thing, as we all know. And so if the AI already knows this, why can't it just create a cat? Why can't I just say, hey, Unity, David, give me a cat, and not like a cat from some backlog of pre-modeled cats. No, give me a cat as you, the AI, would imagine a cat. Make it out of polygons, and then make sure it runs on modern hardware, and just figure it out, goddammit. It's just like, somebody has to do it. David, do it.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, exactly, it's not that hard.
I guess the silver lining is that CCP haven't replaced their 2D and 3D teams yet. This is also the subject of his 2017 DICE Europe speech. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a recording of that. My assumption is that it goes from something he just mentions as an interest in 2016 to a full-fledged focus for his 2017 speech. The title seems to reinforce that. Going back to the Dyson spheres, though, I really need people to understand the kinds of things that the CCP Hilmars of the world talk about at industry conferences. This speech was 40 minutes long.
Then I want to go into the brain and kind of understand what's going on there. And I have these various models on how to kind of think that through, how to make our brains be happy. And I'm a big fan of the Maslow hierarchy of needs. The Maslow hierarchy of needs have taught me a few years back to really relate to what it is that we do, because I see EVE Online, and like I said before, it isn't really like super good if you just rate it as a computer game. It's complicated, takes long, it lacks a little ding, 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 and the scores. So it isn't like that kind of experience. So it's a kind of a different thing. And I kind of struggled with that. Should we add more ding, ding, ding to it now that I learned more about that? No, that doesn't seem right. Maybe a little bit. Maybe it can be a little less kind of crazy hardcore. And I found through this model to kind of realize, okay, it's a self-actualization machine. So through EVE Online, players are enabled to self-actualize in a virtual world in a way that maybe they can't do in society. So there, we can provide different platforms for different people to self-actualize. And that is the ultimate purpose, according to Maslow, who did this in 1943, by the way. Pretty smart guy. So here's kind of the typical sort of highlights of your lives, having children, getting married. Here's an EVE monument and an EVE spaceship. And we've done the research. This is often the case you find in EVE Online players' homes. So we kind of think we're already doing this. And in my research for this talk, I found this. So this is the modern version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's called the 30 elements of consumer value. We have not yet applied it at CCP, but it seems very fitting. It's a really good read. So it kind of organizes the value you can provide to consumers into these functional, emotional, life-changing, and social impact layers, which very much map to the Maslow hierarchy of needs.
This other version of the elements of value pyramid with the explanation from its website he references in its speech, this is business people slapping their heads together to come up with a fun and interesting way to crack psychology of consumers. In general, the more elements provided, the greater the customer's loyalty and the higher the company's sustained revenue growth.
So we actually live quite a bit in here. Definitely entertainment is a part of it and needs to be there. But you can see there's so much more we could do than just provide fun. And then we have provides hope, self-actualization, motivation, heirloom, affiliation, belonging, and at the top we have self-transcendence. So we are one of the few things that can really exist on this layer. You see something like a Facebook, this is the connect value. So that exists in a functional domain. Whereas I think what we can do all the way up here. So I would encourage you to check this out. I'm going to certainly dig deeper into it and see if we can apply it more to kind of talk about these things at CCP.
There's just something fascinating about a man whose company has stumbled this much, standing on a stage in front of fellow human beings with a graphic bastardizing the somewhat controversial work of a psychologist to explain how he wants people to self-actualize by buying and using his product, and how he wants CCP to dig deeper into these ideas. This commentary fits with his vision of EVE Online and the metaverse. We want to create virtual worlds where people rank their experiences in them as some of the highlights of their lives. CCP provides you with a virtual world, and you get to enjoy self-actualization as you and your multi-box fleet of 10 mining ships silently shoot lasers at space rocks for several hours so that you can pay your space rent to the player corporation you're renting a station from, and then pay subscriptions and microtransactions to cost to CCP to play their game. And it's not like this is just a CCP thing. It's not an EVE thing. We see this across the entire industry. All of this is why walking in stations exists. It's what Incarnate was about, it's the $70 monocles, and it's buying a leather jacket for you and your in-game avatar. But the point has been belabored enough, so let's move on.
We're actually a lot at CCP now. We've gone through a really difficult period of kind of restructuring our first kind of wave after EVE Online. I can tell you the second album is a hard thing to put together.
It's an interesting way to talk about everything that happened, but let's glimpse a snapshot of what that second outcome actually looks like. That's my polite way of saying we're going to talk about blockchain finally. Just kidding, we're going to talk about NFTs. It's close, we're almost there. There's one more.
We are kind of generally investing into things that fall into kind of these themes of like nurturing the core, which is doing things like opening free access for EVE Online, doing kind of true innovation with EVE Online so it goes and prospers for another decade and decade after that. And we're all...
It's the fourth quarter of 2021 and NFT craze is in full swing. Electronic Arts is heralding NFTs as the future. 3 months later, EA's CEO will walk it back. Most companies will because it's a dead-end grift tech. But back in November, EA was on board. Lots of companies were. Hilmar has been pushing blockchain since at least 2016, and now everybody else is too. So now's the time to strike. A quick little tidbit here about EVE. MMOs generally have server clusters with cute names to differentiate them. EVE Online has 3 servers. Serenity, the Chinese server, Singularity, the test server, which was shut down a couple years ago, and Tranquility, which is where all the EVE things have occurred since 2003 across the globe, including for Chinese players who have VPNs and don't play on Serenity. Though the goings-on in EVE Online are anything but tranquil, Tranquility is a nice name, and it starts with the letter T. Anyways, enter the Alliance Tournament, a team versus team tournament. Tournaments mean prizes, and prizes mean opportunity. Now, look, CCP, for all their blunders, aren't incapable of predicting consumer feedback. They've said it before in the past that when they step into controversy, they knew they were stepping into it. However, unlike a thief who waits for a homeowner to leave before throwing a brick through the window, CCP prefers the more direct approach. Kick the door in and cross your fingers. You've already heard me talk about how NFT's interest in the industry would wane severely within the next 3 months, so what happens next should hardly come as a surprise. And at this point, the ensuing PR meltdown, it shouldn't come as much as a surprise either. CCP repeatedly stresses how Tezos is energy efficient, because EVE Online players are obviously a bunch of very environmentally conscientious folks running their 10 simultaneous accounts to mine asteroids, and that's the real issue they had with it. It wasn't environmentally friendly enough. And to Hilmar's credit, the EVE Online community did have some very predictable feedback. It was a lot of curse words. The problem with dipping your toes in a controversy like this is that it tends to make people question what's going on behind closed doors. When you're talking about a company of hundreds of people, things like this are never really just a small thing. Certainly not when the CEO is involved. Bodies are being put to work here, checks are being cashed, teams are being formed, priorities are being set. So the natural question evolves out of the outrage. Where does this road lead? And so, CCP Hilmar made a statement to the public. He says that blockchain is untapped potential, but it's just not ready yet. NFT means not for tranquility. But specifically, not for tranquility. One thing I should immediately mention here is, why not EVE Online? One might assume it's a matter of community outrage, and to some extent that's surely true after Incarna. However, the NFT issue sheds a little bit of additional light. EVE Online is on Steam, and they closed the valve, on crypto and blockchain. The platform prohibits applications built on blockchain that issue or allow exchange of cryptocurrencies or NFTs. I guess that means that eFrontier is also closed off from Steam? That would seem to be the implication. There's one additional component to this, though, and CCP themselves said it outright. The amount of transactions that happen in EVE Online every day, and I'm talking server transactions that happen in EVE Online every day, it's way beyond what any cryptocurrency is doing right now. It's like it's way, 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 way beyond. So we're, in an odd way, almost too big for the blockchain right as it is right now. As it turns out, notoriously slow and unwieldy blockchain is just too slow for EVE Online, with its tens of thousands of active accounts and over 20 years of players generating and then destroying items and other bits and bobs of game data. So EVE Online itself is spared a grisly fate via the technical shortcomings that made blockchain undesirable for most things. One little extra bit worth mentioning here is that around this same time, CCP did a collaboration with Doctor Who. Why? Well, because coincidentally, Doctor Who was also doing NFT stuff at the time. Wow. Unsurprisingly, people who played the Spreadsheets game were able to use Google and sussed that out immediately. It also resulted in an amusing moment of fandom solidarity. Alright, with all of that finally out of the way, let's go ahead and set the scene for eFrontier.
One of the research I did while prepping for this talk was a super interesting TED lecture that was talking about like how much of human work has become super abstract. A farmer used to be manual labor, working a farm. I've gone to a cow farm in Iceland where the cows are milked by robots, they're managed by AI, and the farmer has an app on his phone to run his farm, which is basically he's paying farm bill with actual cows. So any job seems to be turning into a computer game. If you think of this notion of gamification, where does that come from? Well, reality is so boring, we have to steal psychological theory from the gaming industry to make reality more interesting. So already we are kind of evolving mankind at a certain clip. 100 years ago, being an investment banker was just like having a pile of money and giving it to somebody. Now it's like super abstract reasoning in purely theoretical domains. They're playing a computer game.
I want to emphasize this out of the gate because while I can't definitively tell you that eFrontier is a play-to-earn game, I also can't tell you it isn't. What I can tell you, though, is CCP Game CEO Hilmar Veigar Petursson's stance on play-to-earn. Gamers hope that the value created from online games can also be used in reality. The online gaming content should have practical values in the real world, he added. The gaming industry should evolve to allow gamers to make retirement plans by using the money they earn from games. It's pretty clear that philosophically Hilmar is all in on the concept, and he's making a Web3 blockchain cryptocurrency game that's less constrained by the various contractual, legal, and community shackles that have held him back. But not the taxation shackles, hilariously.
I point them to player auctions in Hong Kong that sells you spaceships in EVE Online and ISK like there's no tomorrow. Like I was asking you about non-transferability.
Yeah, right.
It's happening anyway.
Yes.
When I look at my own data, it's rampant. People are doing it. They claim they don't want it, but
They do.
I
They
have
do.
just facts to prove
Yeah.
otherwise. There's about $1 million per month of liquidation happening in EVE. I've also calculated, if I look at EVE Online, the aggregated economy, and if I look at the assets on average that people have, and if I transpose that to the offshore market value in Hong Kong, then people's savings in EVE Online are on average $1,300. And I found statistics that the average saving of the average American is $500, which is shockingly low. And I was thinking, okay, I have a lot of people from America that play EVE Online. They have more savings in EVE Online than they have in their bank account. If something happens to them, I mean, they should be able to pull on that.
Yeah.
If they need to pay a medical bill and the 500 isn't enough and they have 1,300 in EVE, who am I to prevent that really?
Right.
They've spent 20 years accumulating all this savings in EVE Online.
Keep in mind, he's talking about paying medical bills using the example of theoretical but illegal and impossible to realize profits in EVE Online accrued over 20 years. Not the greatest sales pitch when you think about it. Although he does acknowledge that capturing this value from EVE Online isn't possible due to the aforementioned legal issues and tax issues and whatnot, well, again, that's where crypto is supposed to come in. But also not as effectively anymore. Though I'm not an expert on the ongoing situation with crypto, I suspect that achieving this was probably easier a decade earlier when it was basically an entirely unregulated market. But okay, 2025 it is, I guess. Talking about eFrontier itself is a tad trickier than discussing the history of CCP's ideologies and the aspirations of its CEO. As of the making of this video, the non-disclosure agreements have loosened up, but ultimately what information has resulted is just more of the same stuff that we already knew before. In some respects, what we know now about the game has actually gotten worse as far as their business strategies go. And that's really what these videos are about. Business. CCP's messy history of decisions and internal leaks provides a great lens for looking at the kind of greedy decision-making that's becoming rampant in many larger games industry companies. You saw it earlier before, EA wanted to get on NFTs, immediately realized it was a mistake, backpedaled and moved on. They are just one of many companies who have done so. Speaking of leaks and NDAs, although the news of CCP raising a $40 million investment had come over half a year prior, this is yet another chapter in CCP's history that involves a leak. A lot of them, actually. The first one is a bit more innocent, but really starts to raise some eyebrows because of the language used. EVE Online on #blockchain. That one went over oh so well, and CCP had to comment on it. Amusing. But let's circle back to that investment real quick. It's March of 2023 and venture capital firm A16Z Crypto enters the fold. This financing was led by Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, with participation from Makers Fund, Bitcraft, Kingsway Capital, Hashed, Nexon, and additional participants. A16Z is through and through crypto. It's the kind of investment company that includes run-of-the-mill crypto bro shibboleths everywhere you look. Not financial advice disclaimers litter their blinding white web pages. I mean, just look at this. 3 paragraphs of disclaimers for an article about vesting in Axie Infinity. If you've watched the aforementioned Line Goes Up video by Folding Ideas, this name probably actually sounds a little bit familiar to you. Axie Infinity serves as the focus for the video section on the Play to Earn games, and A16Z apparently loved Axie Infinity to the tune of leading a $152 million investment into the game back in October of 2021. Since then, Axie Infinity has been crumbling. Also, apparently eFrontier wasn't worth $152 million, but who knows what CCP themselves chipped in, I guess. According to an article by CoinGeek, Axie Infinity's viral status earned it attention from hackers who drained the company's coin for hundreds of millions of dollars, but of course, the people in charge are accused of having cashed out before announcing the hack. The rapid death of NFTs only helped to pour concrete on the grave, allegedly reducing the value of Axie's NFTs by 99.9%. It's safe to say that eFrontier's progenitor is having a pretty rough time. How sad. Anyways. Andreessen Horowitz is principally A16Z. Horowitz is your typical rich crypto bro venture capitalist. He loves niche dead-end tech fads, and he loves crypto and AI. A newsfeed of him includes things like apparently failed rent-to-own housing startups, lots of crypto and play-to-earn games, and presently an obscene amount of AI in everything. AI in biotech, AI playing with your medical information, AI for white-collar workers, AI doing your accounting. What could go wrong? In case it wasn't clear, here's one for the Dune fans. Horowitz is why the Butlerian Jihad happened. Both interpretations of it. Back on the Frontier track, the announcement has effectively been flubbed and pitchforks are arising. Needless to say, tempers over eFrontier run hot, and the EVE Online community recognizes it for what it is. However, 2 problems arise, one of them leading back to why I have done all of this. The first issue is that the game doesn't strike me as being targeted squarely at EVE Online players, but rather it seems to be a bit more of an overlap by virtue of it being, in many ways, just EVE Online with blockchain and some gameplay changes. The other issue is that CCP, despite leaking like a rain cloud, has been rather vague about eFrontier. I mentioned this in part 1, but after the trailers, nobody knew what they were even announcing. Although CCP have been public about the website and their white paper, a lot of people aren't just going to go looking for that kind of stuff. The information is publicly available, but only to the people who actually are looking for it. For most, they just pass on, and for less of the most, they make a critical comment about their non-gameplay trailers and lack of details. What is Eve Frontier? That's the question. What is it? Fortunately, I can answer that without even touching a single shred of leaked or NDA information at this point, because CCP did as crypto bros do. They wrote a white paper. A white paper, according to Investopedia, is an informational document issued by a company or not-for-profit organization to promote or highlight the features of a solution, product, or service that it offers or plans to offer. In the context of business, that seems like a relatively benign thing. In crypto, it has a similar but culturally different context. When a crypto engineer puts together a coin and writes a 10-paragraph essay on how they're going to revolutionize finance so they can rug pull your money, that's a white paper. In Eve Frontier's case, the white paper is largely a gobbledygook of crypto, Web3, blockchain terminology, and shibboleths to make sure that readers know that they know the hustle. Hailing past the Carl Sagan quotes and the chart about quantum physics, which has absolutely nothing to do with Eve Frontier, and the prattling about virtual game worlds, little bits and pieces of gameplay concepts do start to appear. Every action in Eve Frontier requires energy. NPC trade will kickstart the economy with players coming in to fill the gaps with more efficient operation, somehow not murder hoboing each other in the process of creating hotspots of player economy, buying and selling in-game marketplaces or on blockchain-based substrate. Market prices will reflect the real value of money. Everything you do in Eve Frontier requires fuel. From the moment you undock your ship, fuel. Setting up your fancy blockchain station with ChatGPT integration, fuel. What's the fuel? It's cryptocurrency. Indirectly, anyways. Most of the white paper is junk. Decentralize this, govern that, immutable those. Some of it isn't, though. Some of it describes how the game actually works, if you can actually find it underneath all the paper-lengthening jibber-jabber repeating the same bits over and over and over and over and over and over again. Fuel is mined in the game environment using lenses, and then refined into crude matter using catalysts. Lenses and catalysts have obsolescence included, so you'll need a supply of new ones as you burn through them. How do you get lenses and catalysts? Eve token. CCP will generously give you some if you pay for a game subscription, which is just Eve token, but they're only giving you a monthly stipend to whet your appetite. Apparently, fuel will also be tied to object mass, so if you want to have something big in Eve Frontier, you'd better whale out. Eve Frontier will, of course, feature a built-in cryptocurrency, and that is Eve token, and is used for buying the things that make the fuel, as well as the standard in-game currency used for more or less the same stuff that EVE Online's in-game ISK currency is used for.
Is the basic idea that there is a marginal cost imposed on specific actions in the game?
Yes. So, but think more about it as, so the game gives you agency in the world. You can do something in the world. And how to limit agency, we're gonna do like off-code accounting, but for agency. So every time you make an action, we have an estimation of like how much agency is this giving you. If you take a starship, move it from one solar system to another solar system, it has huge strategic relevance.
So it would have a higher cost.
So it would have a higher cost, indeed. And then, okay, now we basically have energy. And okay, what's a good proxy for energy? Obviously, oil is a good proxy. And then we started to talk to people in the oil industry, and we learned everything about it. And oh my God, that thing is well game designed. Like, and here is schematics for refining. So we have all transposed this into sci-fi. So you have to mine crude matter through rifts in the universe, la 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 la. It's all very fancy. Then you have to refine it into multiple sort of products, etc., etc.
In this way, Eve Frontier has effectively placed itself as an oil baron simulator, with real money where the whales buy in with their investments to take control of the game's fuel economy, and in typical Eve fashion, will no doubt muscle their way with fathomable violence to retain control over their crypto pay-to-earn grifts. It is, on paper, every bit as terrifying as Axie Infinity was purported to be, but undoubtedly much worse because it's Eve. After all, EVE Online is a game known for its cloak and dagger schemes ranging from in-game betrayal and theft all the way to illegal hacking and doxing. Fortunately, the Web3 and crypto space has never had issues with hacking. I'm sure it'll be fine. After all, what could possibly go wrong if you add real-world money to the equation? Well,
he who controls the spice controls the universe.
At least until the rug pulls out. Aside from that, eFrontier's white paper talks a bit about composable resources and singletons, all minted on the blockchain and bound by digital physics with smart assembly tools and smart contracts, embedded HTML5 user interfaces, EVENet, open source, permanent histories. So in typical EVE Online fashion, every problem can be solved by just throwing a new currency at it. Outside of all that, the game has been mentioned or otherwise murmured as having some diversions from how EVE Online functions in a couple of specific areas like line-of-sight mechanics, but eFrontier, as I understand it, is largely just EVE Online with a few gameplay changes in blockchain. Gameplay changes that I've seen some EVE players say they'd love to see in EVE Online, but that I suspect are very much impossible in a game that already suffers from various technical issues as it pushes its over 20-year-old engine to the absolute limits, needing to dump its tick rate below regular 1 tick per second rate in order to stay alive when the player base throws everything it has at the game, and often crashing out servers in the process. Having said that, the minutiae of how the game actually physically functions, I'm not quite as interested in as the business issues behind it. A relatively common thought process in the EVE Online community highlights a recurring question. Why would CCP taint their name and IP with blockchain, NFTs, and probably soon AI? And the answer seems to be that it is just the vision for EVE Online. Not to create a mere game, but to create an environment, an ecosystem where players find their self-actualization by competing with other players in an environment of micro and macro transactions, governed by blockchain and crypto, where players are encouraged to inject money into the ecosystem and even treat it as a place to earn money so that they can pay medical bills and retire somehow. Of course, provided no hackers pull hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto out of their system or rug pulls or anything like that. So, I'm sure it'll be fine. eFrontier, despite only being an alpha or whatever it is, already is pushing through the usual tricks to earn every penny possible. They started charging for access to the alpha servers via founders packs from $40 up to $99. Then they introduced $99 cosmetic packs only a few weeks after loosening their NDAs. All of this is on top of a supposedly optional subscription fee. Let us also not forget that they have tens of millions of dollars in outside investment, so it's not like this is a Kickstarter situation. I cannot stress enough, CCP are charging a minimum of $40 just to access alpha servers and $99 for cosmetic packs on top of running a crypto and blockchain environment. And I have absolutely no doubt that this is just the beginning. Any one of those things in a vacuum would be somewhat questionable by itself, but when you're piling it on top of a game that has pretty much all of the marks of being a play-to-earn game with a CEO who talks about play-to-earn games, it's just compounding things. The optics are nuclear. At this point, I would like to get a little bit more on the editorial side to cap this off. We've seen, going all the way back to 2011 now, probably even earlier than that CCP has had a lot of ideas for how they want to do more monetization, how they want to do metaverse stuff, how they want to create this self-actualization environment. And I've seen people who have played the alpha and they've come back and they said, well, it's interesting. They don't necessarily have to do the crypto stuff, right? It's just a blockchain game. It doesn't mean it's crypto. And my only response to that is, are CCP lying when they say they want to do these things? When they're creating all of these new premium currencies, when they're selling skill points, when they're selling packs that have ships in them, when they create this customizable skin system that requires you to use premium currencies to make stuff so you can sell it on market and game, and then you have the CEO of the company going and saying, yeah, you should be able to value extract the game, you should be able to pay your bills with it. So, what are we doing here? What other purpose is there for this project other than the one they seem to be saying there is for it? CCP, to their credit, were once a genuinely innovative company that did something that was new. But it has been my impression from doing this project that period of time and accomplishment is something that they have been chasing after ever since. The harder they chase the light of innovation, the more into the darkness they always seem to get. In retrospect, I feel like if CCP and CCP Hilmar had just tried to be a little bit less special, they might actually be doing a lot better than they are now, and they might still be independent. But anyways, This has been EVE Online, this has been CCP, and this has been EVE Frontier.
The new empires are rising. The exodus has begun.
But what we have found is because of the designs of EVE Online is extremely balancing, it's hideously complicated, it's a murder, death, scam simulator. I know it sounds a lot like crypto.
Yeah.
So, but